It's time for our discussion segment. For everyone who called in during our phone-in segment and sent in WhatsApp message, we do appreciate your calls and your messages. We do not take it for granted. But now, moving on to our discussion segment, where we'll be talking about the 22nd Daily Trust Dialogue and analyzing the key takeaways from what happened yesterday. Now, the 22nd Annual Daily Trust Dialogue held yesterday at the NAF Conference Center here in Abuja with the theme Food Security, Affordability or availability or affordability. Now, the dialogue is part of the Media Trust Group's contribution to stimulating discussions by Nigerians and fellow Africans towards enhancing national and indeed African integration and cohesion, which are crucial for sustainable socio-political growth and economic development in Nigeria and the African continent at large. All right. Before we go on to introducing our guests for you this morning, let us take a snippet and a video of what the dialogue looked like yesterday and all that happened yesterday. Take a look at it.
The annual Daily Trust Dialogue, according to Kabir Yusuf, chairman of the Media Trust Board, serves as a platform to reflect on national issues and propose actionable solutions to Nigeria's key challenges.
Which is about food, when you reduce it. We use all sorts of language, food security, whatever, but we're talking of food, which all of us can relate to. And why are millions of our citizens not having enough of it?
Chairman of the event and founder, Songhai Farms, set the tone for the discussion by emphasizing the urgent need to abandon archaic agricultural practices. He advocated adopting integrated models to enhance productivity, value addition, and ecosystem efficiency.
How can we unleash new mindsets? Even though our land is getting smaller and smaller, we can. I'm now approaching from the summit. We can unlock the environmental capacity, possibilities of our soil to change this around. This is going to be the provocative thing that I'm going to be launching to you today.
Other speakers, including architect Kabir Ibrahim, President of the All Farmers Association of Nigeria, Idi Maiha, Minister of Livestock Development, and Mera Mehta, co-founder and CEO of Tomato Juice, highlighted the barriers to food availability and affordability. These include insecurity, climate change, inflation, and inadequate support for farmers. They also offered practical solutions to address these concerns.
A classical economic perspective would say that actually availability and affordability typically go hand in hand. When you think about supply and demand, when you have more availability of food, you usually have more affordability of food because as availability increases, prices typically drop. We have not found that to be the case in Nigeria.
That is why the talk all over Nigeria is that there is no food because it's not available. People cannot afford it, so it is not there. So to make food available,
the current hunger situation in the country can be eliminated or reduced significantly through the deployment of the wide range of livestock resources, which can play a significant role in the nation's economy, food security, and rural livelihoods. Nigeria is richly endowed with a wide range of livestock resources, which play a significant role in the nation's economy, food security, and rural livelihoods.
A consensus emerged. For Nigeria to achieve food security and affordability, the government must tackle insecurity, address climate threats, reduce inflation, adopt integrated agricultural models, and provide value-added support and incentives to farmers. Without these measures, the goal of food sufficiency may remain elusive. Shafiu Suleiman, Trust TV News, Abuja.
There was a highlight of the dialogue yesterday. What stood out for me was the chairman of the occasion, Reverend Father Godfrey Nzamujo, and what he spoke about Songhai and how he spoke about our arable land and telling us that it is doable because with the fact that we've neglected nature and microorganisms in production of food is what is affecting us at this point in time. But despite the fact that our arable lands are reducing, it is still doable. I have been to Songhai, the one in Port Novo, and I can attest that that man is doing wonders in such place. And it won't take much for it to be replicated in Nigeria, and we'll have a lot more of such in Nigeria. But to help us have a better understanding of the dialogue and all that took place, We're being joined by the Group Executive Officer of Media Trust Group, Malam Ahmed I, Shekarau, via Zoom. Thank you so much for joining. It's good to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's go straight to our discussion this morning. A lot of people came out to say that the topic and the choice of this year's theme, food security, affordability and availability, was quite timely. I would love to know what factors influence the choice of topic for this year's dialogue.
Well, thank you once again. Maybe as a brief background, this dialogue started about 21 years ago, in 2004, to be precise. The board of our company, bearing in mind the fact that the role of the media in society is not just limited to informing, educating, and entertaining the public, but also, entails setting the agenda for public discourse, came up with this platform where, as one of the leading media organizations in Nigeria, throws up issues of public interest that Nigerians and even non-Nigerians disengage, come up with solutions to challenges that bedevil some sections of the society, and also come up with ideas on how best we could manage our society well. Now, if you look at it, prior to the coming of the Tinubu administration, Nigerians were hugely challenged in terms of sustaining their livelihoods.
True.
And then came in Tinubu on the 29th of May 2023, announcing an end to petrol subsidy, which has been a major source of relief to livelihoods of citizens. That added to the policy on allowing the Naira to find its own bearing in the market, made it quite difficult, much more challenging, after the difficulties that Nigerians have been going through, under this administration's predecessor. The situation became really compounded. So last year, we took as a theme Tinubu's economic reforms, and then we tried to look at who are the gainers and who are the losers. Now, towards the end of last year, the World Food Program, came out with a projection of the number of Nigerians that will face serious food insecurity within this year. The number came up with is 33 million based on their projection, which is about 8 million higher than what, they projected for last year. And we thought that there is no better time to sit down and discuss how to address this huge challenge, because a society that is unable to feed itself is actually clearly, physically insecure. So basically this informed the decision to come up with this thing.
All right. So at this point, I love how you started off from, how it started and how we followed the timely, following with timely conversations. Personally, I attended the last year's dialogue on gainers and losers of Tinubu's reforms, and it was quite informative. Now, were the primary objectives of this dialogue, achieved? And to what extent would you say they were achieved?
To a reasonable extent. There are usually on almost a daily basis conferences that hold, across our country to discuss issues like this one that we've put together. But because of the reputation of the Media Trust Group, looking at the caliber of personalities that attended the event yesterday, you could, reasonably say that, yes, it's not just a mere talk show. It's actually, a forum that has brought together eminent people from different sectors especially within the agricultural sector. We had the Speaker of the House of Representatives, represented by Honorable Chike Okafo, the Chairman of the House of Representatives Committee on Nutrition and Food Security. We had the Minister of Livestock Development, a new ministry created by the current administration, and the Pioneer Minister, who actually is not just, a farmer in theory, is a practical farmer. He has a farm that is well known, called Zaidi Farm in Kaduna. He has said it, that, he is not just preaching that people should embrace farming, but that we should practicalize it. And that's why, the conclusion, of the dialogue yesterday was that every Nigerian should adopt this policy, or every household should ensure that it sets up a mini farm, around its vicinity, such that it will produce a number of the items it consumes within the family, so that part of its public expenditure, will actually be cut. Because like one of the guest speakers, the CEO of Tomato Juice, said at the event yesterday, 2/3 of public spending of virtually every Nigerian today is committed to providing food, for members of that kind of household. So for you to ensure that you actually are able to save and invest for the future, of your family, you should endeavor to, plant, whether vegetables and some other items, put up a small, livestock farm around your neighborhood,
Okay.
Where most of your animals or your need for protein will actually be catered for.
All right. Thank you for opening our eyes to that. Now, let's talk about the key takeaways from, the dialogue yesterday. Certain things stood out for me, but I would love to also hear your perspective. For me, what stood out was, Reverend Father Godfrey Nzamuju talking about Songhai and how he was able to maintain agriculture, and through it generating other things from biogas to, having everything in Songhai, from Songhai, produced in Songhai, to service and manage Songhai. And he said, even if we're losing arable lands in Nigeria, it is doable. Yes, we can. And then we also saw the CEO of Tomato Juice, Ms. Mera, talking about sustainability and how they're able to maintain all year round sustainability of tomato products, maximizing it, and making pays that are affordable for Nigerians. But from your perspective, what were the major key takeaways that stood out to you that you think you would want Nigeria to hear?
Lillian, one of our major encumbrances as a nation is that we've always depended on subsistence farming, which can only feed, a few families. And that's why year in, year out, we spend millions of dollars importing food into this country that is actually abundantly blessed. This is one of the key takeaways from this forum, that we must stop that lip service. We must fundamentally move from subsistence farming to mechanized farming. And the forum came up with ideas on how we can actually achieve this. Like you said, this man that chaired yesterday's event is not really a talking person, he's a doing person. Some facts have been, presented about how he was frustrated even to go and set up his own farm, off the shores of Nigeria. But yet, so many state governments have invited him. He's shared ideas, and he was asked a pointed question yesterday. How are they doing? Those farms that you supported some state governments to establish, are they doing well? I think the answer he provided reasonably was that so many of them are not actually functioning optimally. Now, if an individual like him could set up, a farm that is thriving and making waves across, West Africa, what stops our government, from actually doing it? What stops other individuals that have the resources, the wherewithal, from also establishing similar, farms in Nigeria? We have them. We have, people who have the resources, much of which is focused on politicking and some other ventures that may not really, be beneficial, especially to the entire society. It may benefit whatever those other ventures may benefit individuals, but when you want to do something that will impact the entire society, go into ventures like this.
Okay.
Apart from this,
okay.
The communique of the forum also came out strongly to say, look, government must tackle the security challenges that we face within some of our food basins. Benue, has largely been disturbed. Over 100,000 of its population is living in IDP camps. This should not be so, because it's one of our food baskets. Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi, Borno, Yobe, they all produce certain products that we rely on for our feeding. So the government must, move away from lip service, address these security challenges practically, such that these people will be able to access their farms. Indeed, a few weeks ago, we had stories about, people going to their farms to harvest, and they find bandits, terrorists, setting their crops on fire. This should not be allowed.
Okay. When you spoke about, the chairman of the occasion, Father Godfrey Nzamuju, and what he did, and the honesty on his part, saying that the farms established in Nigerians for governments and some governors who asked for it are not performing too well. The question bugged my mind on, don't you think it's time for private investors and private business owners to go more into food production? I have been to Songhai Farms in Port Novo, and I know the beauty and wonders of what is going on there. And this is a private business owner who is doing this. Just like we have, the Dangotes who are, taking over oil and, taking some private parts and private businesses. Don't you think this should happen in agriculture as well?
Absolutely. I've hinted on this. There are so many individuals I know whose names I wouldn't want to bother mentioning, who have some of these institutional farms. They produce thousands of, variety of crops. They have fish, ponds where, for instance, a particular farm I know of, around Buhari, belonging to an individual. This individual makes at least 150,000 per day from the sale of fish every day. This may be, one of the smallest, institutional farms that we have, but, there are many more that we have that have the resources to go into this. Now, one of the fundamental mistakes that a lot of people make is that, farming is meant for some other people that are not, advanced in terms of education. No, wrong. It's actually one of the major sources of creating wealth, both for an individual and for a community and for our nation entirely. So clearly, there are many people who have the wherewithal to go into agricultural, production. And this is one of the strongest points that came out of the communique of yesterday's forum.
Okay, now let's talk about follow-ups. During the last dialogue, a student asked a question that did resonate with me, and I said I was going to ask that question today. What plans does Media Trust Group have to follow up on these recommendations that were being given, towards the government authorities and the bodies we had there?
We do this almost on a daily basis. Interestingly, Minister of Livestock Development used our platform yesterday to present more like the blueprint of his ministry. We took note of that. We are going to publish that, and as the fourth estate, as part of the fourth estate of the RIM, we will follow up diligently on this. At the highest level of our company, there are some discussions with the founder and director general of Songhai Farms, to try and, come up with some other ways of engaging with some other stakeholders in the Nigerian society to embrace principles that actually catapulted him to the very influential position that he has risen. So, as a media, organization, on a day-by-day basis, we follow up on the reports that we've published. So we will move from one end, to another. For instance, the representative of the Speaker of the House of Representatives said they have, the 10th House of Representatives has before it 15 different bills that are aimed at enhancing agricultural productivity in our country. We will follow up diligently on this to know which are the bills. We will publish these bills and then ultimately also check to see how they scale through first, second, and third readings at the Parliament, and then how the various segments of the society that are supposed to benefit from this legislation, pieces of legislation, actually get to benefit from them.
All right. We do understand how this government and government officials are quick to put pen to paper, but with little or no actions. So do you anticipate that the dialogue outcome would influence, any government policy on food or related to food security in the long run?
Reasonably so. We want to give government the benefit of the doubt always. We shouldn't really, appear to be pessimistic. Even the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security actually wanted to be part of this event. It was at the very last minute, we understand, that he got called up for an official, for a national assignment elsewhere. And that's why he sent, his special advisor to represent him at yesterday's event. As I said, the media trust has, an enviable reputation such that whatever, comes from our staple, people follow it diligently, and the government, and we, over the years, including even a board of economists that we have, we see that whenever, the board meets, publishes its communique, we've seen the impact. We've seen government change certain policies. We cannot really claim that some of these changes are directly have direct bearing with the positions that we've taken. But for us, we are comfortably convinced that, because you see that after we issue a communique and come up with certain positions, a month, 2 months, 3 months down the line, you see changes in public policy, and that gives us confidence. So we really want to give the government the benefit of the doubt, and beyond this, the takeaways are not just meant for the government, are meant for the overwhelming number of Nigerians. The proprietor of the Songhai farm spoke, extensively, and I believe he has inspired so many Nigerians, to take to farming. And if that happens, we may not be able to say, okay, so and so and so person actually started farming as a result of what they've had from, Professor Nzamujo. But even the Minister of Livestock Development made strong advocacy. He went to the extent of saying that anytime there are festivities around his household, he doesn't go to buy animals. He drives into his farm, picks any animal, that he feels, is good, and uses it. That could inspire change in the minds of so many people. My mother comes from a village where they hardly buy anything other than seasonings. In fact, even the seasonings, they don't really use the modern seasonings. They use, what we call the dawa. And so overall, you see that they don't really spend anything, in preparing their food items. And that's it.
All right. Before we go, just 2 quick questions. Based on the dialogues, do you see, we had a lot of young people there. Would you say they left with a positive note in your perspective and what you observed? Would you say they left with a positive note and a different mindset towards farming and agriculture?
I strongly believe so, because some of them were interviewed by our colleagues from Daily Trust and some other media platforms, and they indicated that they were really inspired. They indicated that they were really inspired during the interviews. That's why every year we bring in these young people, some even from secondary schools, so that they will be inspired to take action by the time they get to positions of authority.
All right. Now, finally, reflecting on the event, what aspects do you consider that were the most impactful, and are there areas you believe that could be improved in subsequent dialogues to come, especially when it comes to picking timely topics that would impact the politics and policy and also the people in the nation?
Yeah, well, one of the key things for me is that this topic is actually timely. Is really timely. The organization almost always, excellent. Not because I'm part of Media Trust, but from 2004 when this started, it's very obvious. Yes, there are challenges. Sometimes you approach some of the stakeholders, some of those whose voices actually carry a lot of weight due to some pressing national issues, and sometimes due to prioritization, they don't really come. We feel saddened by some of this, but we are always encouraged by the fact that when you bring in even the people you least expect, they make, strong, propositions that influence, even if not government policies, but individual decisions. I give you the example of last year. When we were planning for last year's dialogue, we had an uphill task getting, personalities, subject matter experts to accept our invitation. You will recall that we went up to the last minute trying to get the Minister of Information, the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning to participate. Unfortunately, he didn't really confirm, his participation, even though we got hints that he was willing to participate. And up until we got to the venue of the event, he wasn't there, at the event. And he didn't send a presentation. So these are challenges that we try to surmount, every time we're working, we're planning. From the lineup of the eminent personalities that have attended this dialogue, from 2004, very powerful personalities. In 2007, I think, or was it 2007, okay. We brought in the then, the chairman of INEC, and other personalities who spoke about free and fair elections, that were coming up that year. Oh. So over time, there was a time we brought in, the former president of Ghana, I think he's now late, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, to speak about democracy in Africa. So the selection committee, the organizing committee for this dialogue, always actually brainstorms, comes up with powerful topics that will resonate with the happenings around the period that the dialogue is coming up, and then bring in subject matter experts that dissect those issues.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning. Malam Ahmed I, Shekarau, it's so good to have you. Thank you for opening our eyes to the key takeaways of the dialogue that happened yesterday. And to be honest, I like other Nigerians, are actually looking forward to the next Daily Trust dialogue, which we know is going to be next year. But I mean, it's not too late to start counting down. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, just there we're talking to Malam Ahmed I, Shekarau, who is the Group Chief Executive Officer of Media Trust Group there, telling us and talking about the key takeaways from the dialogue yesterday. If you did miss, please do also catch it on our YouTube channel. It has all the details, and it was so informative. I didn't miss a single minute out of it because of how informative and educative and solution focused it was. So do also catch it and keep yourself informed, like I always advocate for. Well, we've come to the end of the discussion segment.